and welcome again to Digging Deeper. Now, if you're just joining us for the very first time, to explain what Digging Deeper is, it is a video recording that is meant to help you work your way through a passage that is on the topic that is what was dealt with on Sunday morning at Lifepoint Church. And so this is a way to go a little deeper on that topic, to gain a little bit more understanding and maybe a little bit more of a comprehensive understanding of what Scripture has to say on a given subject that takes us a little farther into that topic or that subject than we were able to go during a 40-minute message from Sunday. And it also helps concrete some of those things that we have learned from the message into our minds. And so that's the purpose behind this. Of course, you can use it by yourself, but we encourage this to be used in life groups or in a group of people that are wanting to study together. And so I do encourage you to use it that way. I hope that you're able to use it that way, get some people around you. And what I do is I ask some questions, I pause, and I give you a chance to discuss those questions. And so I try to give you a moment to do that, and I hope that you take advantage of that. Please pause when I tell you to pause, and then take a moment and discuss as a group the questions that we have here. And I want to add this week, just so you know this is very important, I think, is that there is no reward for getting through all these questions. If your group gets stuck on one of these questions and starts discussing it in depth, and it leads into another discussion, I mean, if that's on the topic, my goodness, well, just stick with that. You know, if that is something that really is scratching an itch, and you sense that there's a real need to talk a little more deeply about something in the passage, maybe it's not even a question from that I mentioned, but maybe it's a question that arises as you read the text that we're looking at. That is fantastic. You know, I just encourage you to run with that. And again, it doesn't matter if you get through all the questions. If you get on one that is really important to your group and your group is really wrestling with, stick with that and spend the time necessary to work through that. Okay, well, I want to start off with the first three questions that are common for every one of these, because these are the questions that we ask each time in order to get us oriented toward the topic and kind of refresh our mind also about what the message was. So the first question is this: what did you like in the message? What did you like in the message? Was there something in the message that you particularly connected with, you thought was just really good, something that you want to remember? Maybe it's something you wrote down. What did you really like in the message? So take a moment and discuss that as a group. I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, second question. What did you disagree with in the message? What did you disagree with in the message? Was there something that you said, I just can't agree with what was said there, that doesn't sound right, that I take exception to that? Well, I think that's great, because that means you really thought through the message. I encourage you to discuss that, and maybe there are others in your group that wrestled with that same thing, and maybe some of them figured out something that addresses that disagreement. So take a moment and discuss that. What did you disagree with in the message? Let me pause now so you can discuss that. Okay, third question. What do you remember the most from the message? What do you remember the most from the message? Was there something that really stood out to you from this message? Was there something that just seemed like it was extremely important and something that you really hope to hold on to? What was that? Share that with the group and talk about that a little bit, and what made it so meaningful, or what was why it was the most memorable thing for you. Take a moment to discuss that. All right, good deal. Well, let me move on, and I want to ask a couple questions here to just get us started as we discuss this. How would you define insecurity? How would you define insecurity? Let me ask that question first, which may, if you've already listened to the message, and hopefully you have, it seems a little foreign to it, but we'll be looking at a passage that I think connects very closely with what the message touched on. But how would you define insecurity? Let me give you a moment to discuss that. Okay, I don't know how you define insecurity or what you came up with as a group, but I think insecurity is something that we talk about sometimes, that I feel insecure, I have some insecurity, etc., etc. Well, insecurity, as I researched it, and as I looked up the definition in the dictionary, insecurity is really a lack of confidence. It's a lack of confidence or self-doubt. It's the sense that we think that we are not up to the task, that we are not proceeding in life confidently or with certainty about what we're doing, that we doubt that what we're doing is right, and we're doubting ourselves and our actions or our intentions. So insecurity is tied up with self-doubt. It's tied up with a lack of confidence in ourselves and with what is going on in our situation, is feeling not secure about the situation we're in. So I don't know what you all mentioned as a group. Maybe you had some stories to share about that, but that's really where the definition, where the dictionary defines that, or how the dictionary defines that. Well, second question, what impact do you think insecurity has on a person? What impact do you think insecurity has on a person? Let me pause while you discuss that for a moment. What impact do you think insecurity has on a person? Okay, hopefully you had some discussions about that, or maybe some personal anecdotes even about how insecurity has impacted you or how it impacts people in general. I think that probably there's a couple of ways that insecurity particularly impacts us and impacts me. I would say everybody, how it commonly impacts people is, the first thing is it creates a fear to do things. It creates a fear to do things, and that's just the idea that there's something before us, something that maybe we know needs to be done, but we feel like we're not up to the task, that we are not able to do that thing, that we're fearful. And so I think fear is a byproduct of insecurity. When we feel insecure, then we're afraid to move ahead. We're afraid to do what needs to be done. We're fearful and we're concerned, and we feel like this is something that can't be accomplished. And the second thing, and it's kind of connected to that, I think, that comes from insecurity is just an inability to take risks, or an unwillingness, maybe is a better way to put that, an unwillingness to take risks. Just a sense of risk aversion and not wanting to try to stick our necks out and try something difficult, because if we lack confidence, if we full of self-doubt, then we may feel that, well, hey, I don't want to try to do this thing because it's certainly going to fail, and there's no way we're going to make it, be able to be successful at this thing. And so I think insecurity evidences itself in fear, number one, but also in an unwillingness to take risks. Okay, let me move on and just comment briefly on the message from Sunday. The message really dealt with that second part of the Lord's Prayer, second phrase in the Lord's Prayer, hallowed be your name. And as Matt said, hallowed is not a word that we use very often. Hallowed is kind of a strange word for us. We think of Halloween, but other than that, we don't talk about hallowing things. Maybe that's a word in the Gettysburg Address, but that is a address from yesteryear, and we just don't use the word hallowed very much. But so I did a little research into the word in the original in Greek and what it meant. And it comes from the same root as the word holy. It comes from that idea. And so the meaning of hallowed would be consecrated, or treated as holy, or sanctified, or honored. So those are some different ways that word could be translated. So in other words, it would be consecrated be your name, or treated as holy. May your name be treated as holy. That would be a way to put that. Or sanctified be your name. May your name be sanctified. Or honored be your name. So those are different ways that we might describe what it means to hallow the name of God, or how for his name to be hallowed. And so those are just some different ways that we might be able to put that, and maybe you all have some thoughts from the message around those definitions, or around those other ways to describe hallowed. But I thought there was just a lot that was said on Sunday that was very significant about hallowed and how we hallow God's name. So let's move on, and we're going to look at a passage that deals with insecurity, but also it deals with insecurity in a roundabout way, because it deals with insecurity by taking us into the nature of who God is and how he relates to us. And by doing that, I think that we can get a sense of why we hallow God's name, what makes him so incredibly great, and why he is such a significant figure. In fact, he's the all-consuming, ultimately significant figure in history and in the present. And so we're going to look at Psalm 139 today. And I want to ask the question as we start out, what strikes you about God from this passage? So we're going to look at Psalm 139 and ask the question, what strikes you about God from this passage? So let me read Psalm 139. Maybe you can read it in a couple different versions. I know it's a longer passage, so you may not want to read it too many different times, but this is what the ESV says here. It says, "To the choir master, a psalm of David. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit and down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. Even the night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there is any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. There is so much there, and such an incredible psalm there. And I hope that I gave you a chance to read that. If I didn't take a chance to read that, I don't know if I paused. But anyway, what strikes you about God from this passage? I mean, there's so many things here that you could identify in this passage that really underscore the majesty of God and highlight who he is. But, one thing I noticed in verses 2 through 4 is his omniscience. The psalmist says, God knows everything about me. He knows the totality of who I am, of what's going on, of what I'm about. He knows everything, my posture, where I'm at, what I'm about to say, what I think, everything. He knows me in absolute, complete totality. He knows everything about me. And then in 7 through 10, it talks about his nearness and how the psalmist says there's just no way to get away from God, that he is always with me. He is always right there beside me constantly. He's always there. And then you see his power in 15 and 19, just how powerful God is, and how limitless his ability is. My friend, and when he created the psalmist in his mother's womb, he talks about there, and how and in verse 19 he asks him to slay the wicked, and so that supposes that God has the power to do that God has the power to accomplish that. And so the psalmist is just really regaling us with all the aspects of who God is, his power, his omniscience, his concern. Verse 17 talks about how precious are your thoughts, O God. And those are not just thoughts in general, in context. Those are the thoughts of the psalmist. God is thinking about you. He's thinking about me. He's thinking about every one of his children. And so you have this just remarkable look at all who God is in this psalm. That's just a few things that strike me about God from this passage, but there may be other things that you came up with as well. Second question here, what difference should it make that God is intimately acquainted with our ways? Why does this matter? Let me ask that again. What difference should it make that God is intimately acquainted with our ways? Why does this matter? Let me take a moment and pause while you discuss that. Okay, this is got to be something that impacts us, right? It's not just meant for us to know, but what is the impact if the psalmist says that God is intimately acquainted with our ways, that he knows everything about us, everything we do, everything we think, everything we say? Why does that even matter? Well, I think that it matters because it recognizes or drives us. It should drive us to honor him, to hallow him in the way we live and the way we speak, the way we think about him, etc., etc. Because if we're always in his presence, if wherever we go, we are in the presence of God, well, that's significant. I heard a story recently about, this was about a corporal or a some kind of, and this was in a foreign army. This has been from years ago. This was a commander of some kind. He just was really angry at his troops, and he would explode, and he would just vilify these people and just read them the riot act, and it would just explode unnecessarily on these people that he was in charge of. And the chaplain that was assigned to that unit came to him and said, tell me something. If you were in the presence of the king, I think this was an English army, would you explode like that? Would you exhibit that kind of anger? And the guy said, well, no, I wouldn't do that if I was in the presence of the king. And the chaplain said, well, you're always in the presence of the king. And what he was saying was that we're always in the presence of God himself. And so if that's the case, then how important it is for us to recognize whose presence we're in and to conduct ourselves accordingly. And that's, I think, what David is talking about here with this psalm, as David writes this psalm, what he is talking about here in this passage, the importance of recognizing God's presence and allowing that to shape our lives in every dimension. Third question here, God's perpetual nearness is a theme in this psalm. How is this a comfort? How does this help with insecurity? God's perpetual nearness is a theme in the psalm. How is this a comfort, and how does this help with insecurity? Let me pause for a moment while you discuss that. Okay, as far as God's perpetual nearness and the comfort it brings and its help with insecurity, I think that when we recognize that God is with us, that he's always with us, we're always in his presence, it helps us to understand we don't go it alone, right? We are supported by one who has an inexhaustible supply. We are befriended and helped by someone who is unlimited in his capability to help us in whatever way we need. And so when we come to that realization, we recognize who God is and how powerful He is and that He is present with us, that brings us comfort, because we realize that even though we may not have the capabilities in ourselves, we got somebody who is able to supply those capabilities as we need them, and to do what He wants us to do. That's really, it's very similar to what Jesus said in His Great Commission. He said there, when He was giving the Great Commission to His disciples, He said, remember how He closed, He said, "Surely I am with you always, even to the end of the earth." And so that's exactly what we get from this. When we feel insecure, when we feel we're inadequate and incapable, and we're full of self-doubt and full of a lack of confidence in ourselves, well, if we shift that confidence over to God and who He is, that enables us to go the distance and to keep on keeping on. God is the one who has an inexhaustible supply and who is able to supply us in whatever situation we're in. And again, I want to emphasize the backdrop to all this as we're going through this, as we think about who God is and who David says God is. This helps us, as we look at it, to recognize why God's name is hallowed. When Jesus said, "Hallowed be your name," the name stood for the person, right? And so the name was the person of who God is, and He is saying that God is all that He has revealed Himself to be. And there's so much of that in Psalm 139. That's what squelches our insecurity and keeps us from being insecure and from having a lack of confidence. Number 4, God's love in this psalm is evident despite God's perfect knowledge of all we will do. How does this certain, stable love encourage you? Let me read that one more time. God's love in this psalm is evident despite God's perfect knowledge of all we will do. How does this certain, stable love encourage you? Now, let me take a moment for you to work through that a little bit. Okay, God's love evident in this psalm, despite His perfect knowledge of all we do. How does a certain stable love encourage you? Well, I don't think I'm going to be overstating the case to say that our greatest longing relationally in our lives is to be, number one, fully known by someone, but also to be fully loved by that one. And there is no one in this world that can fulfill those two things, because there's no one who fully knows us. It doesn't matter if we've had a spouse that's lived with us for 50 years, they still don't know us fully. There's no one that can know us fully, know us completely. And by contrast, God does know us fully. He knows us completely. He knows every dimension of who we are. But the added piece to that is that He loves us fully. One thing that keeps us from letting people get to know us oftentimes is we're concerned that they will withdraw from us, that they will not like us, they will not love us if they know all about us. Well, with God, we find one who knows us fully. He knows us completely in every dimension, everything about us. There's nothing about you that God doesn't know. In fact, He knows you better than and me. He knows us better than we know ourselves, because, number one, He created us. And so He understands every dimension. He understands why you do what you do, why I do what I do. Sometimes we can't figure that out. We can't unscrew that. That is just mysterious to us, why we do the things we do. But God understands and knows everything about us in that regard. And He sees it, every aspect, our motives, everything. But He also knows our future, and none of us can know that. We might know some general things about our future, like we're going to to die, probably, unless Jesus returns sooner than that. But other than that, we don't know our future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but God does. And God knows everything about us, and He loves us completely. Now that is a remarkable combination, to think one so great, one so powerful, one who is infinitely capable of doing all that He desires, loves and knows us completely. That's mind-blowing. And you can see why Jesus would say, "Hallowed be your name," why your name is consecrated, O God. It is set apart because you love us and know us fully. Last question here. When you feel insecure, how does God's careful creation of you give you strength? When you feel insecure, how does God's careful creation of you, verses 13 through 16, give you strength? Let me just read verses 13 through 16 just to refresh our memory here a little bit. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. Now, question again. When you feel insecure, how does God's careful creation of you, verses 13 through 16, give you strength? Let me pause for a moment while you discuss that. All right. When we feel insecure, when we feel that we are not up to the task, we're full of self-doubt and a lack of confidence, this passage here that I just read, I think, can give us a little bit of encouragement to recognize that we are custom made by God, that God has made us uniquely for His glory, for His purposes. He's made us in a special way, personally crafted. We're handcrafted, every one of us, in God's image, but uniquely, with unique gifts and unique capabilities and unique purposes that we are supposed to fulfill for Him. And so I think it's so important in those moments when we feel insecure to recognize that the way God has created us so individually and personally and handcrafted us, it just reminds us that we are God's unique creation, that we're very special to Him. You know, this, just to kind of pull this all together, you know, for Jesus to say, "Hallowed be your name," He had just finished saying, and we looked at this some last week, our Father in heaven. Our Father, that's a word of nearness. Who is in heaven is a term of remoteness. That means He's great, He's transcendent, He's beyond. In light of those two realities, Jesus says, "Consecrated be your name." Your name is to be treated as holy. May your name be treated as holy. May it be sanctified. May it be honored. When we recognize all that God is, that not only is He way out there, that He is all-powerful, that He is running and ruling the universe, but that He is also as close as we are to ourselves, maybe closer, that He is right there with us. When we put those two things in tandem, it removes insecurity, and it gives us a fresh recognition of who God is, of how great He is, and how majestic and holy He is. So next time we're tempted to forget about who God is and His uniqueness and how He stands above everything else and separate from everything else, remind yourself maybe these truths from Psalm 139 and recognize that He knows everything about us, yet He loves us very personally. And He is, in those regards and many others, totally different than anything else in all creation. I hope that helps. I hope that has been a little bit informative to you as we've looked at this, and I hope that maybe you can close your time as a group or even personally just giving some praise to God, recognizing who He is. As Matt said, this is a phrase of praise. When Jesus says, "Hallowed be your name," He is saying that God is infinitely worthy of our praise. And so I encourage you as a group to just take a moment reflecting and recognizing who God is and how great He is. Let me close this in prayer, and then we will wrap it up. Father, thank you so much for your remarkable character. We thank you that you know us fully, but you love us fully. And not only that, you are one who is high, exalted, lifted up above all else, that your glory no one can fathom. And so, Father, we want to honor you as holy. We want to recognize your greatness and your majesty. And we thank you so much for this time. We thank you for this opportunity to look into your word. And when we feel insecure, when we feel like we don't matter, we pray that we would, instead looking within ourselves, we would look to you and recognize who you are. Thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us for Digging Deeper. I hope this has been helpful. And of course, if you have anything you'd like to let me know, you can let me know at toldham@discoverlifepoint.com. And otherwise, we will look forward to being with you again next week. Thanks a bunch.